It was Martin Luther King Jr. who said of my hometown, "Birmingham is probably the most thoroughly segregated city in the United States." He wrote this from inside the cell of Birmingham City Jail in 1963. 5 miles away and 25 years later, I was born into a Birmingham that looked quite different from the one that Dr. King knew. However, despite the immense progress that has been made within the last 50 years, my city is still living with this line, a physical barrier called Red Mountain. And it's this line that continues to act as a dividing line, separating the white and black communities. The fact is, even 50 years later, we are still racially segregated. But this is 2015, not 1963. So how are race relations perceived by Birmingham residents today? On my journey to answer this question, I was faced with a bit of a dilemma. Growing up as part of the ecosystem myself, I spent my entire life firmly situated on this side of the line, within the predominantly white community. But in order to get the full picture of what was going on, I needed to cross over Red Mountain and engage in conversations that I wouldn't normally have. But how? After debating this question for a while, I finally decided the best thing to do was to just go. And so that's what I did. I literally walked out my front door and I traveled to different neighborhoods that I had never seen before in my 25 years of living in the city. And for the first time, I saw my hometown from a different point of view. And shortly after that, I began having conversations about race and reconciliation. And I started with people in my community, in my own backyard. But eventually it expanded out across Red Mountain and to the rest of the city. And what I uncovered from these conversations was that many within the white community said that there really aren't race issues anymore. It's more about socioeconomic inequalities. However, within the black community, they all unanimously agreed that yes, we are still living segregated lives. Another common sentiment I received within the white community was, we just want Birmingham to move forward. How can that happen if we keep living in the past? And those within the black community said, yes, we have come a long way, but we still have a long way to go, and there's a lot of work to be done. So after gaining a more complete understanding of Birmingham's current attitudes of race relations, the challenge became clear. How can we improve race relations and encourage inclusion when roughly half of the population doesn't see race as an issue anymore? And zooming out to look at the larger national context shows us that this is a problem not exclusive to Birmingham. Right now in the United States, we're living with two different realities. And with tensions boiling over, we can no longer afford to sweep this inconvenient truth under the carpet. The first step of addressing this issue is open dialogue, to physically sit down together and have a conversation. So in the beginning of March, that's what I did. I invited a diverse group of Birmingham community members to come together and talk about race in our city. And this is a clip of some of those conversations.
Sometimes I feel a very huge self-consciousness when I'm talking to black people because I'm like wanting to make sure I come across the right way. And I really care about you and I want to give that equal opportunity. I don't want to say anything that you're going to think is awful or whatever.
So there's certain things that you go through to heal, but I don't think that like my grandmother would ever want to heal from certain things that she endured.
Population level, like people like in Ferguson and etc. Like people are angry, but they're not being listened to, and so you're not going to be able to get them to go kumbaya when you're not listening to them. Because
I think there's always a level of discomfort.
That's not a
meeting new people, meeting new ideas, meeting new cultures.
My sister, saying other family members, for example, if I told them what we were doing and coming to this, it'd be more so like, what are you doing that for? You know where you are, stay on this side.
So I was able to facilitate these conversations through 2 co-creation workshops, which I held in Woodlawn, a historic neighborhood in Birmingham that's predominantly African American. And altogether, there were 25 different participants who contributed to the open dialogue and co-creation session. The goal of the workshops were broken up into 3 different parts. The first was to discover common goals. And in order to find these common goals, I asked participants to list their top 3 aspirational goals for Birmingham. As we began discussing what the wishes were, we discovered that many of them were the same. And one of the main ones that kept coming up again and again was to break down segregation and to bring together people of different backgrounds. The second goal was to identify current barriers to integration. And again, I asked participants to list out the 3 most pressing barriers that they felt were keeping community members apart in Birmingham. And with answers like honesty in addressing what effects the past has on our present, knowledge of how to even start a conversation, and unfamiliarity, one of the most common responses came down to a lack of understanding of one another. The final goal was to take one of the discussed barriers and to brainstorm a community project to address that barrier and bring community members together. And some of those concepts were documented here. And a few of the examples were to build public playgrounds, develop community gardens, and to install Wi-Fi hotspots in the projects to support online learning. The feedback that I received from both of the workshops was, how do we keep this going? Talking is a good start, but it's not enough. So after receiving this feedback came the questions, how do we sustain these conversations? How do we keep getting people into the same room? And how do we generate creative social interventions that encourage people to look past the status quo? And this question led me to develop Red Mountain Collective, a social justice and art residency, and an initiative of Come Together Birmingham. And the goal of Red Mountain Collective is to produce community projects such as the concepts that came up in the workshops before. And the points of impact to create this change within the residency are twofold. The first will happen within the residency itself among the diverse artists and designers working to collaborate to make these projects. And the second will happen in the Birmingham community itself as the residents go out and implement and engage the public in those projects. The basic structure of the residency will work like this. First, the artists and designers will submit proposals for their community projects. And then a pre-appointed community advisory board will review the submissions and make their selections. All accepted artists and design residents will be housed and given studio space in Birmingham. And when residents come to the residency, they will be appointed a community advisor to help guide them throughout the project and help ensure the interests of the community are upheld. And finally, the residents will be given 2 to 5 months to create and implement their community projects that will ignite open dialogue. To turn this idea into action, I've written a full proposal and I've submitted it for funding with several different foundations. And in the coming months, I plan to continue to work to secure funding in order to meet my goal of launching the pilot in the fall of 2016. To follow my progress, please follow me on cometogetherbham.com. And thanks for listening.